I've always been a very quick talker. I've
Mm.
always been very quick to share my own experiences and my own um, successes and
Yeah.
failures. And sometimes I think one of the most important things in life is to actually, everybody loves to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, the way to win clients, the way to win business, the way to get ahead is to actually let other people talk about themselves
Mm.
and just to shut up for a second. And I mean, as a lawyer, I'm always talking, I'm always selling, I'm always trying to give, advice. But sometimes the more you talk, the more you can land yourself in hot water. And
Yep. So it is 4:30, I believe, Friday, and we're just wrapping up the month. And joining me is the legendary Mark Lazarus. How are you, Mark?
I'm good, thanks, buddy. Thank you for having me on the Rani Arsanios podcast.
Absolutely. You're one of the people that I definitely wanted to have on the podcast. You bring a very, very diverse experience and background. So it is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And next to us are some legends that you probably like one or two, maybe all of them. Who's your favorite out of all these five? We got Bill Gates.
My
We got
favorite.
Bezos.
I think
Musk.
my favorite has got to be Elon Musk.
Yeah, he's my favorite too.
Yeah.
Like I love them all, but why? Tell me
He's
first
just
why.
a super cool guy,
Yeah,
doing super cool things
yeah,
in his own quirky way.
yep.
And I think the others are all controversial.
Mm,
I think they would all be real dicks to work for.
yep.
But
Yeah.
I think Musk is just really cool and
Yeah.
look, they've all done extraordinary things, but I think you just talk about Tesla
Yeah.
and you get hundreds of thousands, millions of people tuning in.
Yep.
And I just think that there's so much more that he's going to do and
yeah.
where things are going to go. I mean, Facebook is obviously dominated
Yeah.
social media platforms for so many years,
Yeah.
and you hear the back end stories of the Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezos's, but Musk is out of those guys. I'd say Musk is definitely the one that I would want to shadow for a day.
Do you think he's a time traveler? Or do you think
Because he's just so advanced in terms of what he's done
Yeah.
with in the electric space, or with
maybe-
with
yeah, or maybe he's a robot. I don't know. Like when he was on that, have you seen him on the Joe Rogan podcast?
no,
Like he joked a few times on the podcast and outside of it, saying like, "I could be a robot. Who knows?" In a way that is like, you're not really kidding, mate. You could be. You know what I mean?
look, these guys are all extraordinary in their own right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of success comes down to luck. I think with these guys, they're all geniuses,
Geniuses.
and I think they were all geniuses from very young age. And
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna succeed.
Yeah.
But these guys just had vision
Mm.
and passion.
Yeah.
Vision, passion, and determination, I think. And these guys are unstoppable.
Yeah.
And I aspire to be able to achieve something big. And I see why you've got them here up on your wall, because
They mean a lot.
it means a lot.
Yeah. It's
So
besides them being an inspiration for myself and a lot of people, it's just one of those things. I keep telling people, like, I have them on the wall because every time I look at them, it just pushes me to work hard, because I see how miniature what I've accomplished in my life versus other people, and I look at it from a positive way. Okay, so what can I do, and what can I work on to bring value? Because you look at every single person here, what they've done in some shape or form has touched the lives of billions.
Yep.
Right? And a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, what I do definitely does not touch that, the masses, you know. So it is it's pretty cool to do something that affects the lives of a lot of people. And touching on Musk and like the fact that being a genius is not only the only thing you need to be successful. He works like no other. He works so hard. Like he puts in, and he said that too many times, he works more than 80, 90, probably in the vicinity of 100 hours a week. And back when Tesla was still starting, he took all the money he made from PayPal, and I'm not sure if you know that story, but he put it all in Tesla. And Tesla was on the verge of being bankrupt, and he was sleeping in the factory, getting 1 or 2 hours sleep a day until he turned it around and it became what it is today. I mean, how many people could have quit at some point, you know? So he, besides his genius, he's definitely a hard worker and quite resilient. And the other thing is that I find interesting is, you know how in our society, we define genius and intelligent in different ways. One of them is like how articulate and how perhaps the pace and how you talk. And there's this thing that if someone talks really slow, they're not smart. But if you listen to him, he doesn't talk fast. He takes a lot of time to think about every single word he says. And he's traveling into different places when he's talking. He's like tapping into these, be it engineering or science or I don't know, but it's just, it's interesting to see him talk as well,
I think what I've started to learn in my career and in life, I've always been a very quick talker. I've always been very quick to share my own experiences and my own successes and failures. And sometimes I think one of the most important things in life is to actually, everybody loves to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, the way to win clients, the way to win business, the way to get ahead is to actually let other people talk about themselves and just to shut up for a second. And I mean, I as a lawyer, I'm always talking, I'm always selling, I'm always trying to give, advice. But sometimes the more you talk, the more you can land yourself in hot water. And, how to warm to a client or to anybody, whether it's in a relationship, is to kind of let them talk and let them talk about themselves. And true story, I was briefing a very intelligent barrister on a very particular matter that we have in court this week. And he was furious about an incident that had happened with one of our clients. And one of the things he did was he wanted to convey his message. And he was like, oh, just hold on a second. I just got to collect my thoughts.
Yeah.
And he stopped and he paused. And the way he then delivered the message that he was trying to portray, he'd thought about it. It just wasn't off the cuff. So when you go back to these guys, I get it. They, the true, the guys and girls out there that have really succeeded in life really understand people.
Yeah, of course.
And I think, so I get why you say they talk slowly, because he's listening and articulating and working out.
Yeah.
He's always a couple of moves ahead. All of them are always a couple of moves ahead of anybody else.
Of course.
And that's why they're so advanced, and they can see into the future as to what people want before people know what they want themselves, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anyone can do a lot with speaking less and listening more, 100%. Do you, going back to these guys, and obviously being a lawyer who worked for big FMCG companies like Monster Energy, but also having your own practice here in Sydney, Australia, you've been doing this for many, many years. How crazy, and we hear stories all the time, how crazy are the legal battles that these major companies get in?
Crazy. I mean, working for a big FMCG like Monster, where there's, market cap in the billions, several billions, you know, you're talking about going to great lengths to protect your brand that you've built over the years. So whether it's you know, your intellectual property or whatever it may be, it's really not about the money. It's about reputation. It's about, you know, it's about protecting your investment in your brand, in your image, in your reputation, in what you've created. I think me working with a number of smaller startups, it becomes a lot more challenging for them, particularly when they are looking to build and scale on an idea or a concept that, you know, they're fearful to talk about their idea or concept because they don't want it to get, they don't want their idea to get stolen. And that happened to me yesterday with a client who was dead set scared about talking about this idea that they think is going to revolutionize a particular industry because they don't want to have it taken away from them. And I'm like, well, if you don't fucking talk about your idea,
then how can I help
then just sing kumbaya between the two of you for the next 5-10 years and let somebody else come up with it while you sit on the fence. So, you know, you need to talk about it, but the bigger companies can very easily come along and squash you if the idea is good. But then it comes down to how well you execute and deliver, and how quickly you build up a following, so that when these bigger brands and companies do come along, they either want to acquire you or your loyal customers want to stay with you because of what you offer and the way you treat your customers or your clients that is different to some of these bigger companies. But going back to your question about the legalities, I mean, these, you know, especially a lot of the larger firms, etc., where these companies will go to, can be embroiled in massive litigation. I mean, you've seen the Apple, Samsung disputes. There's, you know, there's disputes all the time. You've seen with Uber.
I was just going to say Uber. Uber must be one of the companies that have had the biggest amount of disputes and money put into protecting themselves and defending themselves.
But even Facebook has had issues, you know, privacy issues. I don't think there's one, at least that comes to mind for me, that stands out as being the biggest. I think, you know, everything from Microsoft to Amazon. For Amazon, the way they treat their employees or their workers, or there's Bill Gates has had issues about the way he does things. There's, you know, it's no one's immune from it. You know, we've seen all these movies that have come out of the stories that have come out of these startups. I think you have to be ruthless, and I think each of the founders in any business has to be ruthless to some extent to get ahead. But you know, as you build and scale, you know, you'll go to great lengths to protect your brand. And you know, if the law comes into that, it doesn't really matter whether you're David or Goliath, like how big you are, you'll take on somebody that's small that could be potentially be a threat. And if they're not a threat now, they could easily become a threat as they grow. So
so the idea that a big company with an army of lawyers versus a startup or a small company that's still trying to make a dent in the world, who may not have the funds, the amount of money, or the experience to deal with you know, a legal battle. I guess that's a very interesting thing. So from what you've seen, like, obviously the obvious thing is smaller companies are always at a disadvantage, but there must be some ways where small companies or startups have from the start good structures, and this is where great lawyers come in, where they help them protect themselves.
There's always ways to kind of bulletproof your business, and maybe bulletproof is not the right word, because it's, you know, as a small startup coming up against a big multinational, you're always, you know, at risk and can be exposed. But I mean, I got a client the other day that, and I don't want to kind of go into too much detail on names, that, you know, has created a very unique product that has got some fictional characters in this particular product that kind of depict well-known characters from some other brands and big brands, and you know, they've created a product that they've managed to really scale globally, you know, and sell this product through Amazon, etc. Now this product is, you know, a product that you'd buy for your children, and you know, you'd buy as a Christmas gift. We're talking about a $20 or $30 product here,
right?
And you'd think, oh, like, you know, a big multinational company, you know, over in Los Angeles, you know, or a celebrity, they're never going to come after these guys. You know, these guys are going to flog and sell 30,000 units of this product, you know, per week or whatever, and it's not going to be an issue. And they've had cease and desist letters that have been sent to them from the representatives and either the in-house of these companies or these celebrities, or big law firms representing these celebrities, saying, we're aware of what you're doing. You're infringing upon our intellectual property rights. You don't have the rights. We haven't given you the rights. There's no license agreement in place or anything to that effect. And you know, unless you remove and stop selling and account to us for the profits that you've made, and basically pay us, we're going to come after you. Now, whether they actually come after them or not is a different story. But when you get a letter like that, you have to take it seriously.
100%.
And that means that you may have 5,000 or 10,000 units of a particular product that could make you a lot of money as a small business, that you suddenly have to cease and get rid of. And this particular client had numerous disclaimers throughout this product. You know, that, you know, these are fictional, and when I say that the characters, etc., that were depicted were, you know, like changed names, or different, you know, that sounds like and looks like a particular person or character or whatever, but it's slightly different.
Right. So you can argue, and if you're that company, you can argue it's the same thing.
You can argue, and you can have disclaimers, etc. But that's still not foolproof. And you know, so from a legal perspective, what can you do? Yes, you can have disclaimers. You can have, you know, terms and conditions on your website and privacy policies. You can get intellectual property protection through trademarks or patents or design rights. You can have agreements in place, whether it's shareholders agreements, you know, whatever it may be, services agreements, you know, particular provisions in contracts that don't allow you to reverse engineer a particular product or formula or whatever, so that they can then go and on-sell it to someone else after you've paid for the use and for the ownership. So there are lots of things that can be done, and they should be done. Whether small business and startups want to spend the money on that when they can spend it on Google AdWords, or, you know, getting a marketing, you know, on a marketing budget, or you know,
investing in other products,
you know, on building their app, or on actually putting that money towards, you know, building or buying more units of a product. Sometimes the legals is very low down the totem pole, unfortunately. It's a service that nobody really wants. Everybody needs it. All the big companies need it. They've got in-house teams. You know, they've got parties that are scouting the market for trademark infringements that do it 24/7. But a lot of the time when you're starting out as a business or as a startup, the first thing you're thinking about is, you know, how do I get an MVP? You know, how do I scale this? How do I get it to market? You know, I need to put this amount in my web page, in my website. I'm taking work away from you. In your app, you know, in your design, etc. And you know, and then I need the right kind of technical person on board, and I need money for wages and staff. The shareholders agreement, or the trademarks, or the, you know, or any of the other agreements and legals that come with it, well, that can wait till next month. But then suddenly next month comes and they haven't done it, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger,
and it gets pushed back,
and it gets pushed back, and then you end up spending a shitload more money fighting off these guys with, you know, having to get lawyers to respond to letters, and then having the threat of having to change your brand.
Yep.
and you know, so you've built a reputation and goodwill for 6 months to a year. You've got investment. You know, you've come up with a cool name and a brand, and you're online and you're selling it. And suddenly you're told you've got to stop selling that. You've got to change your entire branding and your name. Now, if you're in the restaurant game, and you've got menus and you've got signs and you've got websites and you've got tangible assets that are a particular brand and name, and suddenly you've got to go and change all of that, that can
Massive
cost
step back.
a huge amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like when we tend to push things back because we don't want to invest in it, we know it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to invest in, you know, having the right lawyer, or it could be anything else. But you just tend to sometimes push certain things aside because they might be intimidating or even costly. But the procrastination on trying to save money now, a lot of times end up costing you a lot later on.
Always.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Always.
Yeah. So obviously the type of legal issues that or battles that tend to materialize in an industry like FMCG are different than that of tech, for example. There might be some, like, I'm not sure here, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that something like trademarks is super big in FMCG. And
so FMCG, for anyone who's listening, is fast-moving consumer goods. Right. So, you know, whether it's food and beverage, whether it's cleaning products or beauty products, it's basically goods that are flying off the shelves quickly and normally for a low cost. So, you know, energy drinks, for example, carbonated soft drinks, etc., are FMCG brands. You know, crisps, Smith's chips, Arnott's, that kind of stuff.
Mac and cheese too.
Exactly.
Whatever
your heart desires. So, the kinds of issues that you have with these types of products are, it's not only the IP and the trademarks and stuff. It's also, there's also a lot of regulatory issues. So, for example, with energy drinks, what comes to mind with energy drinks? There's all kinds of regulatory issues, from caffeine content to sugar content to consumption levels to underage drinking of energy drinks, just like you have with other industries where you've got regulatory issues. Even with the Ubers in this world, you've got regulatory issues. So labeling issues, marketing issues, regulatory issues. You know, you're running promotions, in-store, online promotions. You know what you can do and what you can't do, and you know, you win a VIP trip to XYZ, you know, driving a Formula One car or whatever. It's, you know, you've got issues with these very big, you know, with the Formula One or various other entities about, you know, naming rights and permissions. And so there's different areas of law that, you know, and with tech, I mean, tech has got, you know, whether it's issues because of litigious issues, or it's issues in terms of just legal requirements in the form of, you know, capital raises and having to have the right kind of lawyer to assist with that whole process, you know, with term sheets, with seed investors, with venture capitalists coming on board, and what kind of preference shares they want, or ordinary shares, and you know, and liquidation preferences. It's a whole different world, and you need to have somebody, you know, whether it's a startup founder that knows what they're doing, or an advisor that knows what they're doing in that space, to kind of help guide them, because there are always legal issues that come up in every different kind of sphere of business, whether it is tech startups, whether it is fast-moving consumer good brands. You know, there's always agreements, there's always things that you need to do to protect yourself.
It's interesting as well, where, you know, sometimes you think you operate because your company is in a certain country, for example, Australia, and perhaps like the example you were talking about, where a company in LA sued the company, who I'm assuming was based here or something. But anyway, you could have a brand, or you can have a business, and then you know, somewhere else in overseas just comes after you. So it's not even like just
We
locally.
I had that with a client that registered trademarks here in Australia, and there was a company over in Los Angeles, literally across the road from Disneyland,
Mm.
who had a business that had a very similar name to our client here in Australia, and they, all the way from California, issued through Australian lawyers, issued a cease and desist against my client for trademark infringement and passing off, trying to pass themselves off as being. And this company actually had no ownership rights or registered trademarks in Australia, but they raised, but we're going to be coming to Australia.
Mm.
We basically told them to go F
Mm.
themselves.
Yeah.
And we were first to market. We got the trademark. Our concept and product was far superior to theirs
Yeah.
in terms of the offering here. But there was no possible likelihood that anyone would be misled and deceived into believing that my client's concept was in any way, shape, or form similar to this other
Mm.
product over in the US. Firstly, because most Australians wouldn't have even known about this
Yeah.
product unless they were there.
Yeah.
And secondly, because they had no rights here in Australia, so they just had no
They had no luck
recourse.
with that. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, we were successful on that, and we got the trademark in the end.
Mm.
And yeah, but as you start to scale and move your business overseas as well, whether it's with trademarks or whatever it may be, just because you have a registered trademark in Australia doesn't mean you have a registered trademark in the US or the UK or parts of Europe or China, China.
China.
Yeah. So
Shout out to all our friends from all around the world.
So yeah.
How do you get trademarks in China? Like, so everyone talks about, like, we know this, like, we hear about this since, like, I used to hear about it since I was pretty young, that forget having, like, IP and legal protection in a market like China, just because of how tough it is. I'm not sure if it's the laws or how hard it is to implement them or enforce them, So I'm always under the impression that if you have a product, especially like, if it's a physical product, could be FMCG or durables or whatever, having that being like not having a replica show up next day in China is almost impossible. I'm assuming other parts in the world too.
Yeah, look, just with trademarks really protect a name or a concept or a logo, or if you're Cadbury's, even the color purple.
Yep.
They don't necessarily that's what basically a trademark's protecting. It's not really protecting the idea or the concept. There's other forms of intellectual property. If it's something very unique, there could be a technical aspect of it. It could be a patent. I'm not a patent attorney, and many patent attorneys are actually have science degrees and backgrounds. But there is, there's different ways of protecting your whatever it is you're building. But going back to your question with respect to China, it's very difficult to prevent, a Chinese manufacturer, etc., from potentially ripping off what you're trying to build, and for them to create it themselves and then to go on and flog it to somebody else. And I'm not, outing China. This can happen anywhere. So having agreements in place is important, and and having agreements with your manufacturers or suppliers or distributors, and then the governing law provisions become important in terms of where that would be argued in which kind of competent court and jurisdiction. I wouldn't want to be running a claim in China, as an Australian company.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean it's going to be that easy to try and bring or commence proceedings or action against a Chinese manufacturer. So Um, getting trademarks in China is not easy. You've got to have somebody on the ground over there that really knows what they're doing, and understands the language. And there's also, I think it's first to market. So if somebody wants to go in and register the mark straight away in China, they can do so. And there's different requirements around the world. So the whole process with trademarks, which I'm not completely across, I don't do a lot of trademarks in China. But it's a different ball game. Every country has different requirements. But yeah, China's difficult.
It's a tough one. For example, you're one of your favorite startups, which is probably not a startup anymore because they valued at $1 billion almost. Gymshark. So let's say someone in China or someone outside of China goes to a manufacturer, or even anywhere else, let's say Vietnam or any country that manufactures sports apparel and whatnot, and says, okay, let's come up with Gymsharky, and the logo kind of looks similar too.
Well, firstly, Gymshark is a massive company now, and so they would go really hard on anyone that tried to infringe their brand, and they would have the dollars or the pounds to back themselves, and they got investors all over the world. And secondly, I think one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of Gymshark, and I read up about Ben Francis, who started from very humble beginnings in Birmingham, and has built an absolutely incredible business. And Gymshark is one of the first kind of apparel brands to use influencer marketing. So, they have got such a stronghold on followers and influencers that have got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers, that I think a company like a Gymsharky would get laughed at. It wouldn't be taken seriously, and I don't think people would buy that kind of product because it would be inferior, and so it's a different story several years ago. But don't forget, these manufacturers in China and the Philippines, etc., are coming across products and ideas and concepts day in, day out. And so it's not like they're out there really to rip off everyone.
Even if they came up with the same exact thing. I guess the question is, how do you, and I know you don't get involved a lot in like China, like you said, but how tough is it to go after markets like that? Because it's to me, it's always been like, I feel like it's almost impossible. It's something like you don't think about. If it's a market like maybe like in Europe or maybe other parts in the world, you can do something about it. Is that accurate? Or
look, you can always do something about it. It just depends on how much time and effort and money you want to spend on it. And sometimes you can end up throwing good money after bad. So, all I can say is, so those markets are more difficult to go after if, rather than if it's in your own backyard and dealt with two Australian companies that are fighting it out in the Supreme Court of New South Wales or wherever. So all you can really do is make sure that you have the right legal documentation in place to protect your interests as best you can. Nothing is ever foolproof, but it's a lot better having agreements in place that are setting out the obligations of the parties, what's happening if an app is being built, if certain products are being produced, what quantities. I mean, a lot of these companies in China will have minimum order quantities. They won't even take you seriously unless you can purchase X number of units, etc. They're not going to make 30 or 50 units of a particular headphone that you come up with. They just won't do that. It's not worth their time. So it's you got to be a bit vigilant and diligent in doing your research, I guess, as a business, as a startup as well, as to who are the parties, the manufacturers, the app developers, the designers, whoever it is, or whatever it is that you need or want to use in these other countries that have worked with other businesses and startups before. otherwise you can end up being in a position where you can also be held to ransom. Like I've heard of so many app development stories that have gone really bad because you find you have app developers that turn around and say, oh, it's going to cost you $30,000 to build this app, and then you map it all out, and then this is what you think you're going to get for $30,000, and then you get that invoice for $30,000 and they hand over the product and it's like nothing like you expected it to be.
Yep.
And then you say, no, this was supposed to be like this and this is supposed to be like that, etc. And they're like, oh, no, to do that it's going to cost you $10,000 this,
Right.
and then it's like they won't give you the source code or anything like that until you've paid them. And then it's like, well, now what do? Do you jump ship? Do you go find a new developer? You know, you can end up being up for 50 grand, 100 grand, 500 grand.
Crazy business.
So,
Yep. Just on that, it comes down to also, you know, outsourcing software development has like an upside and a downside. One of the upsides is obviously you develop at a cheaper rate, right, or a lower rate most of the time. But then you can also so you order a car, but then you get the car, you just get the skeleton. You get no tires, you get no steering wheel. You know, you look at it from the outside, you're like, damn, okay, I got a car, but you can't drive it. You can't take it anywhere. And that's exactly, I think, what you were talking to, which is, you know, you get handed over a scope and you're like, all right, we'll develop it for you, but then it's nowhere near. And sometimes it's also a matter of expectations. You know, what the scope looks like and what the company who's developed the scope expects these different things to actually work versus the interpretation. And that's where drilling down to the details is very good for both sides.
it's very good. But look, Ronnie, I think no matter what you do and what industry you're in and what business you run, you pay for what you get.
Absolutely.
Life, right? And, you know, I've got T-shirts that I still wear that are 5 years old and they still fit perfectly and they are brilliant and I love them, and yeah, probably should change them.
I was just going to say, you're a lawyer.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it's just that, I don't want to chuck this out. I remember where I got it, when I got it.
Yeah.
And then there's, you know, I love my Primark t-shirts when I used to be able to fly on that big box to other countries. I can't remember what that thing was called. A plane or something? A plane? Aeroplane?
Right.
That's what it is, right?
Airplane?
Yeah? Aeroplane, yeah. I just haven't seen those for such a long time. But yeah, you know, I used to get, you know, these amazing t-shirts for £3.50 and they were brilliant. But, you know, after 2 or 3 wears, they're no good anymore. So you do pay for what you get in whether it's a service or whether it's a product. And you know, sometimes if it comes down to app development, if it comes down to legal services, you know, there are offerings out there where you can get very cheap services that are a kind of a one size fits all approach, or you can invest in the right kind of person, whether it's as a professional, as a lawyer, as a marketing advisor, as whatever it may be, that really understands the scope and the nature of your business and really, you know, drums down to what the core is and what you need. And you know,
Sorry,
even with
I'm going to stop you. Is that why you're one of the most expensive lawyers in Australia?
I wish I was one of the most expensive lawyers in Australia. But I think, though, as you get more experienced and your time becomes more valuable, you know, you start to get to a position whereby, you know, people come to you because they know that what you can do is better than others and that you can deliver. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm the most expensive or the cheapest. I'm somewhere in the middle. For me, the way I work with my clients is I'm very transparent. I like to be their advisor on tap, and I basically always am transparent with fees and how I charge, and I have various different arrangements from flexible fees to retainers to you name it. So, but I'm always upfront. And just going back to that app example, you know, there are opportunities to save a lot of money by going offshore and getting development. But there's very good, very talented people right here on your doorstep that can do it, that you can speak to during the right time, on the right, you know, the right business hours, you know, where you can meet them face to face, and you can basically handhold, or they can handhold you, or vice versa, every step along the way, to ensure that what you have in mind is the same thing as what they're delivering. And that may be because of that disconnect when you're speaking on more and more these days with Zoom and etc. You suddenly start to get the message gets lost in translation.
I always think about that, the fact that we live in a truly, not fully, but a global economy where through technology we can tap into capabilities and people from all around the world. And what is that going to do to, for example, you know, back in the day, you, as a country here, you couldn't hire a marketer from another country. It wasn't, you didn't have the technology, right? I'm talking about maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. But now, you know, with all the online freelance platforms, you can find a ton of people. So eventually, as that continues to grow, you're going to be a one full marketplace where anyone can tap into, you know, but you're going to end up with certain occupations, like, for example, construction. You can't hire someone from another country to do the job. But a lot of the services...
Why can't you hire somebody from... You mean if they're living in that other country?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, of course.
So there will be jobs that you need to physically be there, like construction, for example.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah, I follow.
But everything else is just going to be completely one large pool, you know? I want to switch to something I find a little bit interesting. Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yeah.
So he hired a ton of lawyers because, you know, like everything he does is super controversial.
Yeah.
And he's
a legend.
He's a legend. He's funny. He's hilarious. We may or disagree that some of the stuff he does are offensive or whatever. But if you just look at it from a humor standpoint, he's hilarious. I find him very funny.
Look, it's very offensive. And, you know, there's a lot of the stuff he does is extremely offensive to, you know, various different cultures, including my own.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's hidden, and maybe it's not even hidden, there's particular messages behind it. You know, he is a very intelligent guy who went to a very, very exclusive private school in the UK. And he's a comedian that knows exactly what he's doing. And there is greater good to it. You know, whether people agree with the messages that he portrays and what he's trying to do. And I don't know if you've seen the new Borat movie, which is ridiculous.
I haven't seen it.
You know, people say, did you like the movie? Is it good? And like, no, it's not going to win an Academy Award. It is not a good movie. It's not a fun movie. You know, it's not funny. It's not a feel-good comedy.
Have you watched it?
I've watched it.
Spoiler alert.
Well, I'm not going to. Well, there's
what topics? What
let's just say there's some. You know, he certainly goes out to try and cast some doubt on the current Trump administration and all his advisors, etc. And there's various parties that get exposed in ways that you could never imagine, and people that you would have come to admire and respect for the change that they've brought to society, and then seeing these people in very compromising positions that makes you question, like how fucked up the world has become.
Yep.
And you see it in Hollywood, with with these big time producers and actors that have taken advantage, with all these sexual allegations, etc., that have come out, and it really is disturbing. I would say that the Borat movie was very, very disturbing.
Yep. Did you laugh, Bert?
Say that again.
Did you laugh?
I
Did it make you
I
laugh?
certainly laughed. Certainly when he was taking a dig of my own culture, and yet he's the same, but yet he was just trying to expose how fucked up parts of the states are.
Yep.
He did it really well. But yeah, I mean, it's controversial, but controversy breeds discussion and attention, and that's what he wanted to do, and people talk about it.
So he got nominated not recently, maybe a year ago, to what was the award? And he gave a speech, and it was about.
Yes, I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah, I can't remember now what it was for.
And when he was talking, like, it definitely came across to me that he's not just a guy, like, you saw a side that you did not see before, that you've never seen before, which is he is super, super intellectual, and he cares about the world, humanity, and I kind of felt like a big part of his comedy is to expose stereotypes, the ways some people think and address other people or cultures and stuff like that. But where I was going with this is how big the legal team of someone like him would have to be to deal with all these freaking.
Oh, he's getting sued left, right, and center. But,
yeah. Would you if he came to you and he said, "Mark, I want you to be on my legal team, or I want you to take care of all my stuff," would you take it?
No, I wouldn't do that. Why would I want to do that? Absolutely. I mean, it would be absolutely amazing to be part of a team like that and to get that kind of exposure. It's.
But it can be risky too, like, because he's putting himself in all these different.
Yeah, it can be risky. I mean, it's like saying if you're a criminal lawyer and you're representing, some thug or terrorist or whatever, it's part of doing your job. But if we're talking about Sacha Baron Cohen and what he's done and the claims or allegations that are being raised and and being part of that team, I would I'd be honored to be
if he's listening.
So
Sasha, make sure you bring Mark on the team.
Absolutely. So there's another person that comes to mind who's similar to Sacha Baron Cohen in that same vein, I'd say, is Russell Brand.
Yeah.
So Russell is also, a ridiculously intelligent guy, and a comedian. And I don't know if you've seen some of his video content and YouTube videos and podcasts, and he's also
he crosses the line sometimes.
He crosses the line too, and yet he's also one of these guys that I'd say, is in, is similar kind of fashion and to our mate Sacha.
Yeah. Do you find, what are your thoughts on, lawyers and attorneys who take on controversial, so for example, I was watching this podcast, this American comedian, Andrew Schultz, he brought a lawyer who I believe represented El Chapo or one of his people. I think it was him. And he also, or his law firm, or maybe his boss.
One of them.
One of them. But also, he was mainly talking about money laundering cases. And there are lawyers and attorneys who take on cases. And his question to the lawyer was like, when you represent someone who is, like El Chapo, for example, when you take on someone like that with all these, I don't want to even say controversies, because sometimes it's just like too obvious and, it's just too crazy. or even like a money laundry case. What are your thoughts on, taking something like that? How risky and how
You
you
don't
know
have to take on it anything that goes against your better judgment, your moral values, and your
yeah
integrity, right?
yeah
Um, Look, I'm not a criminal lawyer.
mm,
I do some family law, but I don't do a lot of family law. I'm not in, in an area where I feel that the line is sometimes crossed.
mm,
But, you know, you do have an obligation to your client and to the law, and to the courts, and you got to act in the best interests, regardless of whether you necessarily agree or disagree with a particular value or moral or the way in
mm,
which it's going, because at the end of the day, that your job is to protect that party's interests. So, um, in terms of how I feel, if there's something that I'm dead against,
mm.
I won't do it.
Would
Um,
you investigate a little bit before? Because sometimes it might be grey. You wouldn't know.
it's always good to have an understanding, an
Mm,
idea, and investigate.
yeah.
And a number of the firms and lawyers, small or big, will do your KYC, know your client,
Mm,
background checks,
mm,
for anti-money laundering, and to see that things are things are okay, and that
mm,
they've crossed conflict checks and various other things that you go through to ensure that the client you're taking on is the client that you want to represent, because at the end of the day, reputation is key
yep.
in any business as
Yep.
well. So sometimes you always hear the saying, any publicity is good publicity, um, which is true, but it's also untrue, I guess, because too much bad publicity and people won't go near you or your business. Um,
I think that's a flawed. I agree with you. I think that's a flawed concept. Any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah.
In some occasions it can be, but I mean, think about online reviews. Someone gives you a bad review, that's publicity, isn't it? That shows up on search results. That shows up everywhere, and the next customer or prospective customer that comes in and has a look at that, they're not going to go, oh, they must be popular. let me just buy the product. No, they will have a bad impression, and most likely they will not go for it. So,
and that's human
yeah,
nature.
yeah,
And I think that's the problem. I mean, I mean, one of my biggest issues is that I can't always strive for perfection. So
mm,
again, back in the day when we used to be able to travel
mm.
and go on holidays,
Like 8 months ago.
and stay in nice hotels, and when I was going on work trips and staying in
Mm,
hotels, I'd always be looking. I spent hours, going on, Booking.com and TripAdvisor and trying to find,
mm,
the perfect hotel. And it doesn't exist, because even if you look at the number one hotel in a particular country or city,
mm.
there are bad reviews.
Yep.
There are good reviews and bad reviews. And you go through 5 good reviews, and then suddenly there's one bad review.
And that just
and
kills
it's just like, nah, next,
Yep.
move on to number 2.
Yep.
It's like, best holiday, most amazing breakfast, and then person number 5 was staff were rude, breakfast was shit. The carpets were stained. Oh my God, I don't want to go near that hotel. So look, I think you're right about having a negative review on your site, on a from a Google review point of view, or whether it's a Trust Pilot review or whatever it may be about your product or your site or your service or your business. You don't want that.
Yep.
You always want customers or clients to leave good reviews, if they even leave reviews.
Yep.
Don't believe every review. I think it's important as well to do your own due diligence and to investigate and to speak to other people as well. Sometimes reviews are left on sites because they had a bad experience through a staff member, or my wife's a speech and language therapist, and she works and she is also a linguist.
Yep. Shout
And
out to
she's really good with people
Mhm.
and understanding and listening, and all the time she always says to me, a lot of the time it's not about you, it's about them. It's about what's happened to them during their day, or their week, or what personal issues they've got going on in their lives. And sometimes it's not a reflection of you or your business or your, a cafe or a restaurant. They may have just had such a shitty day, and when they went to that restaurant, the waiter or waitress said something that just rubbed them the wrong way. And from that moment on, there was nothing really that they could have done. The food was okay, it was too cold, or the chips were too crispy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, look, obviously we all strive to do the best that we can, and to ensure that when our customers or clients leave us, they rave about us, because, referral is also so important. In business, it's not only about social media these days and content and articles and what you put out. It's about, you can get more business from repeat customers or clients, that love your product or love the service, who then go and shout out to the rest of the world about that product or service or that person. And that's how you succeed.
I think you're extremely accurate with that. I'm glad you touched on that. So here's what I think. Back in the day, word of mouth, before the digital world, came to surface, used to be super important, because you didn't have exposure to a lot of information, right? So I would go to Mark and say, hey, Mark, do you know a great plumber, right? But then you have things like Google search, or today you have a ton of ways, or maybe let's go back 5 years ago, you have a ton of ways to find the product or service that you're looking for online, right? But as we get more and more hammered with too many options online, right? Too many messages and ads and all that stuff. And I'm a digital marketer. I believe in the digital advertising. There's not a part of me that doesn't believe in it. However, in saying that, I can see word of mouth coming back to be as important as it once was, because of the ton of options that are out there. So I want to just go back to Mark and say, hey, who have you dealt with recently who is really good at X, Y, and Z?
Well, I think you're spot on, but I think it's a case that they coexist. They have to coexist now, and they have to be equal, because even if one of your top clients recommends their accountant or says you've got to use Mark as your lawyer, you then still go do your own due diligence. So you're now ahead of the pack in terms of they're now going to call you or get in touch with you or go to your website.
You have an edge,
and you've got that edge. So they'll go to your website. But if I am told that you've got to use XYZ plumber or gardener, and I go to their website and I see it's really outdated and the content's really bad and it's really sloppy, and there's a couple of bad reviews, then I don't really care what Rani told me about Joe Blogs. I'm still gonna probably be shaped into making my own decision based on the other research that I've done.
Absolutely.
Whereas if they go in and you say, oh, you've got to use Mark, or you've got to use Rani, and then you go on and you just spend 5 minutes, and then you look at their website, and probably once they say you got to use Rani, they're not going to go look for anyone else. They're just going to go and look at Rani's profile.
Yeah, so all you have to be is just look good.
It just look good.
Yeah.
So I think, whereas you never had that option, however many years ago now, where in the early 90s or late 90s, where the internet wasn't even around. So it was only word of mouth.
Yep.
But now, I still think word of mouth is absolutely key. But you can't have one without the other. You need the social media and the digital marketing to get that client. That client then gives, the word of mouth. That word of mouth spreads its own way, and then the word of mouth comes back to you and back to the social media and the digital marketing when they go do their own research and then decide whether they want to use you or not. So it kind of goes around in circles.
Yep.
I think
100%. So product and marketing need each other, right? You cannot have one without the other. Yep. If someone comes to me with a product or a service that I do not believe in, I will not take the job. I'll not take the contract. I'm not going to work with them just because I believe that regardless of how good marketing is, people are smart enough today to know and assess if what they're buying is going to be good enough or not. And so you couldn't do it with just marketing. You need to have a fundamentally and genuinely a good product or service, and then stack on top of it, the word of mouth. And word of mouth is going to come if you have it. And speaking of reputation, speaking of great reputation, and a service that everyone speaks highly of, yourself and Lazarus Legal. And so, if anyone who's listening right now, who has a startup or a business or works in a business, and they need help, whether it's a small contract or they need to have an entire structure in place, or ESOP, or whatever the case may be, what is the best way to reach you? Obviously, excuse me, this is going to go on LinkedIn, so I'm going to tag you and all that stuff, but how else can they reach you?
Well, firstly, I'm just going to say, so Lazarus Legal is a full service firm working with startups and brands and creatives and, fast moving consumer good brands and, doing everything from the ground up. But I was also a barrister for several years, and just touching on that reputation point, one thing I always remember when I was in my early years at the bar was, being taught that reputation is key. And if you screw up your reputation, you're dead in the water, because that's what you've got. So it's all about integrity and building that reputation. As a lawyer, I mean, Lazarus Legal's I've built a solid team of lawyers. We've got about 7 or 8 of us now. And we work in various different areas of law, from property and conveyancing to...
Can you give a shout out?
To shout outs to
the team?
By name?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna by name,
Yeah,
but we've got a solid team in litigation, in franchising, in startups, in FMCG, and we are your advisor on tap. So one of the things that how I differentiate myself is I like to immerse myself in the culture, lifestyle, and ethos of a company or brand or product. And I'll become their external advisor on tap, their external in-house counsel. So, I've done everything from working in London at, Monster, at big FMCG companies, to working for big media entertainment law firms in London. Paul McCartney is one of the biggest clients, to working in small businesses, to working in my own practice. And we're based in Bondi Junction. I've got a website, www.lazaruslegal.com.au. But I've got several clients that are all over the world. I'm a UK qualified and practicing lawyer, so I've got clients over in the UK and Europe. And having worked for Monster, which is headquartered in Corona, wow, I shouldn't even say that these days, in Corona in California. I've been working with a lot of US companies on US contracts as well. So I'd like to call myself a bit of a global lawyer. Our firm is small in stature in terms of, we're a smaller boutique firm, but we work and take on, both on litigation and also on big deals, some of the biggest firms around. So we've got a solid team.
It's not by quantity.
It's about quality. It's about, I am always available 24/7, much to my wife and kids' dismay. But we've got a solid team, and we're not your suit and tie lawyers. We do things.
I can tell.
We do things differently. We rise above. And it's all about, for me, the most important thing in my practice isn't about making a quick buck. It's about building long-term relationships with clients. So yes, I've got a bit of a following on LinkedIn. There's a lot of content I post on LinkedIn and articles. I can be reached on LinkedIn, through most social media channels, and on my website. And then, you can tap into into my website. Or email addresses are info@lazaruslegal.com.au, and can come through to me via that channel as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it has been a pleasure and an honor to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for educating me personally.
So tell me one thing before we finish up here, Rani. Those five guys up there, has anyone ever said to you, what's your order of preference?
Ooh, that is a spicy question.
And we don't need to go for another 30 minutes on this. Just give me 1 to 5. Go.
That is a spicy question. 100% number one, the legendary Elon Musk.
Nice.
Do you want why or just the order?
Just the order. 1 to 5.
Okay. So number 1 is Elon. 2 is Gates. 3 is Zucks. 4, I want to say Bezos, and then Steve Jobs. And the reason Jobs is at the end or at the bottom is because, I mean, he's a legend in so many ways. May his soul rest in peace. However, I haven't, like, when he was like peaking and when, you know, all the things that he's done, I was kind of not tuning in, and I didn't kind of like live it through. But I mean, Apple, like, I heard his stories.
But you have to admit that, you know, since his passing, you know, Apple, at least from my perspective, has not innovated in the same way
Like
as they did when he was around. That maybe that's a very controversial statement, but I just think, you know, you look at the products that are out there now and what he brought to the table when he was around, and, you know, obviously he really did steer the ship there.
Yeah, I think maybe, and this is me just based on what I hear, that could be absolutely not true, but I heard that he wasn't very nice to the people he worked with.
Yeah.
And for me, I try as much as possible to be nice, kind with anyone I work with. And so I think this is important for me. And from what I heard, it wasn't that. But you're right. I think, and to what you said, maybe the innovation, because innovation is a curve at the end of the day. You staying innovative at the same pace is just virtually impossible. You can't keep innovating at the same pace. Eventually that curve kind of plateaus a bit, unless you're Elon.
Well, we don't have to delve into it. Maybe that's another podcast discussion in itself. But I was just interested in, you know, you've obviously put effort into selecting your top 5.
I mean, yeah, Gates is a legend, so he's definitely number 2. Elon number 1, and who do I say number 3? Zuckerberg. And just because when he started, he was pretty young, and what he did and what he created, although, you know, social media was around when he started, you had a couple of networks, you had even High Five and MySpace and all that stuff. What he's been able to do, and again, talking about things that touches people's lives, and arguably now not so positive with all what's happening with the censorship and all that stuff, but no one, like, tell me how many people you know that don't use Facebook, for example. You know what I mean? So yeah,
all right,
but I agree that we can have a whole hour or maybe 2 on them. So
I look forward to getting invited back for that hour or 2.
Mate, you are the advisor on tap.
I am the advisor
on the show.
tap. I am the advisor on tap.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely, my pleasure too. Thank you so much. Thanks.